Once upon a time, in a small village nestled deep within the heart of Africa, there lived a man named Madu. Madu was known far and wide for his insatiable desire for wealth. Despite being poor himself, he dreamed of riches beyond measure. He would often spend his days scheming and plotting ways to acquire more money, neglecting his family in the process. He had a daughter named Adana, a beautiful and kind-hearted young woman who bore the burden of her father's obsession with wealth. Despite their poverty, Adana cherished the simple joys of life and found solace in the love of her family. However, her father, Madu, saw her as nothing more than a means to an end, a tool he could use to further his own ambitions. One fateful day, as the golden rays of the sun bathed the village in a warm glow, Adana walked gracefully through the bustling marketplace, a woven basket balanced delicately on her head. Her ebony skin glowed in the sunlight, and her laughter echoed through the air as she greeted familiar faces along the way. Unknown to her, her radiant beauty had caught the eye of a wealthy old merchant who had been traveling through the village in search of rare goods. His gaze lingered on Adana, captivated by her grace and charm. Determined to make her his own, he approached her father, Madu, with an offer that would change their lives forever. Madu's eyes widened with greed as the merchant proposed marriage to Adana, promising a hefty dowry in return for her hand. The allure of wealth clouded Madu's judgment, drowning out the voice of reason and compassion. Without a second thought, he eagerly agreed to the arrangement, dismissing Adana's protests and pleas with a wave of his hand. That evening, as the moon cast its gentle glow over the village, Adana found herself alone with her father in their modest hut. With tears in her eyes and anguish in her heart, she mustered the courage to confront him about the merchant's proposal. "Father," she began, her voice trembling with emotion, "I cannot marry this man. I do not love him, and I cannot bear to be sold off like a piece of property." But her father's eyes remained cold and indifferent, his heart hardened by his pursuit of wealth. "Do not be foolish, Adana," he replied sternly. "This marriage will secure our future and bring us riches beyond imagination. You will do as I say, or you will bring shame upon this family." The following day, tension simmered between Madu and his wife, Nkechi, as they argued fiercely about the decision to marry off their daughter. Nkechi's heart ached at the thought of sacrificing their daughter's happiness for the sake of wealth, and she refused to stay silent any longer. "You are a fool, Madu," she cried, her voice filled with righteous anger. "How can you be so blind to your daughter's suffering? She deserves love and happiness, not a life of servitude to some greedy merchant." But Madu's resolve remained unshaken, his pride and greed blinding him to reason. "I will not listen to your foolishness, woman," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "This marriage will bring us riches beyond measure, and I will not let anyone stand in the way of our prosperity." As the days passed, his desperation grew, and he resorted to desperate measures to ensure that Adana would marry the wealthy merchant. One evening, in a fit of rage, he cornered his family in their hut, his eyes blazing with fury. "If you refuse to obey me, Adana," he growled, his voice low and menacing, "I will cast you out of this house and disown you. You will be left with nothing, alone and destitute. Is that what you want?" Adana trembled with fear, but she refused to back down. With fire in her eyes and determination in her heart, she stood her ground, ready to defy her father's tyranny and fight for her freedom. Days passed and her mother saw that her husband's greed had clouded his sense of judgment and that would make him really disown his daughter. She feared that her daughter would suffer greatly, so she urged her daughter to accept silently, fearing and worried about her daughter's happiness. As the sun set on the day of the wedding, Adana stood, her heart heavy with sorrow. The marriage ceremony was lavish, filled with opulence and extravagance, yet Adana felt nothing but despair. She was being sold off like a piece of property, her hopes and dreams crushed beneath her father's greed. As the days stretched into weeks, Adana found herself consumed by a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The weight of her marriage to the old merchant bore down on her like a heavy stone, crushing her spirit with each passing moment. In the dead of night, as she lay restless upon her straw bed, dark thoughts crept into her mind like shadows in the moonlight. Alone in the darkness, Adana's thoughts turned to desperate measures. She imagined herself slipping a deadly poison into the merchant's wine, freeing herself from the chains of her unwanted betrothal once and for all. The temptation was strong, the allure of escape tantalizingly close. But as quickly as the thought had entered her mind, Adana recoiled in horror. She was not a murderer, she reminded herself fiercely. She would not stoop to such depths, no matter how dire her circumstances. Instead, she clung to the fragile hope that destiny would intervene, leading her down a path towards freedom and redemption. As fate would have it, destiny soon began to weave its intricate tapestry, unraveling the threads of the merchant's life with a cruel and merciless hand. The old merchant fell gravely ill, his once robust health fading like the dying embers of a fire. The once bustling household of the merchant was now shrouded in an eerie silence, broken only by the labored wheezing of the old man as he lay in his ornate bed, his once robust frame now reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. Adana watched from the shadows, her heart heavy with a mixture of sympathy and relief. The village healer, a wise woman with gnarled hands and kind eyes, shook her head sadly as she examined the merchant's frail form. "I fear there is little more we can do," she murmured, her voice tinged with sorrow. "His illness is unlike any I have ever seen, a dark force that defies all attempts at treatment." As the days turned into weeks, the merchant's condition grew steadily worse, his strength failing with each passing moment. His once vibrant eyes were now dull and lifeless, his once hearty laughter replaced by agonized moans of pain. Adana found herself drawn to his bedside, her heart torn between pity and resentment. She could not forget the suffering he had inflicted upon her, the pain he had caused with his selfish greed. And yet, as she looked upon his frail form, she could not help but feel a twinge of compassion for the dying man. In the stillness of the night, as the stars danced in the velvet sky, Adana sat by the merchant's side, offering what little comfort she could. She brushed his fevered brow with cool water, whispering soothing words of solace into the darkness. And then, in a moment of unexpected clarity, the merchant's eyes fluttered open, his gaze fixing upon Adana with a look of profound regret. "Forgive me," he rasped, his voice barely more than a hoarse whisper. "Forgive me for the pain I have caused you. I was blinded by my own greed, but now I see the error of my ways." Tears welled in Adana's eyes as she listened to her husband's heartfelt apology. In that moment, she saw not an enemy, but a broken and remorseful soul, haunted by the ghost of his own greed. With a heart full of compassion, she forgave him, releasing the burden of anger and resentment that had weighed heavily upon her spirit. And so, in the waning hours of his life, the old merchant granted Adana the freedom she so desperately craved, releasing her from the shackles of her unwanted marriage with his dying breath. As he slipped peacefully into the embrace of eternity, Adana felt a sense of closure wash over her, knowing that she was finally free to chart her own destiny, unencumbered by the sins of the past. In the aftermath of the merchant's passing, Adana found herself adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Though she was free from the confines of her unwanted marriage, she felt a profound sense of loneliness weighing heavily upon her heart. She longed for companionship, for someone to share her joys and sorrows with, but feared that such happiness would forever elude her. Several months passed. One day, as Adana meandered through the crowded marketplace, lost in her thoughts, her path suddenly collided with that of a stranger. Startled, she looked up to see a man with a gentle expression, his eyes filled with genuine concern. "Forgive me," the man said, his voice apologetic as he reached out to steady her. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there." Adana's initial reaction was one of irritation. How dare this stranger bump into her without paying attention? But as she looked into his honest eyes, she sensed no malice, only kindness. "It's all right," she replied, her voice softening slightly. "No harm done." And so, amidst the chaos of the marketplace, Adana and the stranger struck up a conversation. He apologized profusely for the accident, explaining that he had been distracted by the sights and sounds of the market. He introduced himself as Ike. As they talked, Adana began to sense something different about this man. Unlike the merchants and traders who frequented the marketplace, he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her, not for what she could offer him, but simply for who she was. Slowly but surely, Adana's initial displeasure melted away, replaced by a growing sense of warmth and curiosity. In Ike's company, she felt a sense of ease she hadn't felt in a long time, as if she had known him for far longer than just a few moments. And as they continued to talk, Adana found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone else, sharing her hopes, her fears, and her dreams for the future. In that brief encounter, amidst the hustle and bustle of the marketplace, Adana felt a connection forming, one that she knew had the power to change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. In the days that followed, Adana and I grew closer, their bond deepening with each passing moment. They spent hours exploring the countryside together, their laughter ringing out like music in the stillness of the forest. And as they shared their hopes and dreams with one another, Adana felt herself falling for him, heart and soul. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars, he took Adana's hand in his own, his gaze filled with an intensity that took her breath away. "Adana," he whispered, his voice soft and tender, "from the moment I met you, I knew that you were someone special. Someone worth fighting for. Will you do me the honor of being my partner in this journey called life?" Tears of joy streamed down Adana's cheeks as she nodded her head, her heart overflowing with happiness. In the arms of the man she loved, she found a sense of belonging she had never known before. Together, they embarked on a new chapter of their lives, filled with hope and promise, leaving behind the darkness of the past and embracing the light of a future filled with love and happiness.